Hello there. I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Why you bugging? Why you bugging? Well, here are the bullet points for those of you at home keeping score. Cities are on fire. 40 million unemployed in America. GDP to decline by 50% in the second quarter. The velocity of money is dead. Small businesses are dead. And Jay Powell, Fed chairman, says, this is fine. Is it fine? Is it fine?
This is fine.
You bugging? Why are you bugging?
Well, this is fine. You know, the only solution they seem to have over and over is more money printing, and the Fed is at that again, nonstop since 2008, really. Powell says Fed policies will absolutely not lead to more income inequality. This is what he claimed last week. Well, cities across America were on fire. And notice that he said income inequality. You know what money printing does? It causes asset prices to increase and capital gains to increase. He didn't mention that. He didn't mention the wealth gap. So I did want to turn to a chart from Pew, and it shows the share of U.S. aggregate wealth since 1983 to 2016. This is what the Fed has been doing. This is the upper income went from having 60% of all wealth in America back in 1983 to now having 79%, and is probably much higher even now. Middle income has been the huge collapse, as you see, down from 32% to 17%. So they're nearly cut in half.
Well, this is the latest chapter in the global insurrection against banker occupation. You know, we saw it with Occupy Wall Street. There was a concerted effort to talk about how Wall Street and the Federal Reserve Bank are creating wealth and income disparities and distorting the economy and bankrupting the nation. Then we had an uprising in Cairo. We had an uprising in Athens that we covered. And we've had uprisings all over the world as part of the global insurrection against banker occupation. And now it's in the United States. And the U.S. dollar, I guess, is going to have to be sacrificed if there's going to be any hope here.
The thing is, they are printing for everybody, for the entire world, and there are only, at the moment, fiat currencies. So if you disregard gold and you disregard Bitcoin, like most people in the world don't notice that. Of course, the dollar is the strongest of them all, of all of the fiat currencies, because it is the reserve currency. So here's Jay Powell's, printing money for everything. Here's his story right here. Fed bought $3 billion in ETFs in May. Junk bond holdings here include Hertz, JCPenney, Neiman Marcus, and Whiting Petroleum, because of course they do. LOL, nothing matters. So, they basically bought the bags off huge private equity and hedge funds that otherwise would have perhaps closed the gap in the wealth gap between those wealthiest of Americans and the poorest. But they bought the bags off the likes of, Carl Icahn and Warren Buffett, these sort of people, the billionaires.
Right. I mean, the standout on that list would be Hertz. So Hertz was heading into bankruptcy for a year now. And just before they did declare bankruptcy, the central bank buys a bunch of Hertz stock and, to give some backup to Carl Icahn, a private investor, a private equity guy. This reminds me of the ECB funding for the Louis Vuitton entrepreneur who made a huge purchase recently. And that was all funded by the European Central Bank of a private company. So the private banks, if they're buying junk corporations, and they're actually buying an ETF with the ticker symbol JNK, which stands for junk, that means that we've kind of crossed over to there's no turning back now, because the Fed's balance sheet of approximately $7 trillion, and it's adding maybe $1 trillion every 7 to 10 days. The resale value of everything on the books there is zero. I mean, you can't obviously resell Hertz stock because it just went bankrupt a few days ago. So that's clearly worth zero. Everything on the junk ETF is zero. BlackRock, that sells the ETFs, is charged with buying ETFs for the Fed. So the Fed and the government has told BlackRock, buy ETFs, those things that you sell for us with the government with the printed money that we're printing. Okay, that's obviously corruption at the highest level, and it's horrible economics.
The bonds, they might convert to equity, which apparently the Fed's not supposed to own. So, you know, they did not buy the actual shares in Hertz, but they have these junk bonds, which there's confusion out there whether or not it converts to equity, and now they own equity, which they say they're not supposed to own. But the people are always so smarter, right? Let's look at what the people on the other end of all of this free money printing, you know, what they really think of all this money printing. People are mistaking stimulus payments for junk or scam mail. No, they're not mistaking it. It is junk. It is scam. It is junk. This is scam.
Let that be a lesson to you. Money printing eventually comes to an end. And the only thing that you hear is the jammed money printer. And then you're wondering, where's my food? Where's my government? Where am I? And, you know, I'm sorry, but I have to ask, what was that last point you made?
That the people of the United States of America are receiving these debit cards.
Oh, yeah,
the headline
right.
says
I got
they
it.
believe
I got
it's
it.
a
I
scam.
got it. I was so like taken by this flotilla of cash. Yeah, the government is sending the United States citizens debit cards loaded with cash, and they just assume it's junk, and they're throwing it in the garbage. And well, it is junk. You know, it should be thrown in the garbage. There's no difference between a plastic ETF card or, you know, ATM card loaded with fiat money from the government and those trash bags full of Venezuelan bolivars you see on YouTube now. People are just carting away trash bags full of Venezuelan bolivars. All fiat money for 300 years has lost 90% or more of its value. It's all garbage.
Garbage!
Fiat
Things are only going to get better. Of course.
Fiat garbage. Fiat garbage.
This is all fine. So let's look at the headlines about this alleged no wealth and income gap being created by a Cantillon sort of effect that is happening in the United States. This nonstop since 2000, really, when we offshored all of our creative capital, all our industrial capital to China, since we allowed derivatives trading to happen, the explosion in that, and we ended Glass-Steagall. Let's look at some of the data here that shows otherwise to what Jay Powell asserted. This is what happens when predominantly workers with low salaries lose their jobs. Average salaries go up. So here's a year-on-year change of the average hourly earnings of employers. So going back years and years and years, hourly wages have just soared. Why? Well, because this is hourly wages, so this is not the transfers from the government yet in this data. What this shows is that all the low-income workers got laid off. Now you have just all of the white-collar workers, all of the people in New York City and San Francisco and Los Angeles and places like that still have their job. They're able to work remotely from home.
Oh, yeah. This is remarkable that these hourly wages suddenly skyrocketed because of the money giveaways from the feds. And it shows that up until that moment, the average worker hourly wages were below subsistence, right? People are working below subsistence wage levels. They're living in their car and they're working under minimum wage and they work 2 or 3 jobs. And so a cash injection from the government suddenly spikes that hourly wage. It proves that they're living in America on a subsistence wage, which is just one notch above slave wages, right? There's slave wages, then there's subsistent wages, and that's where America is at, 200 million Americans at subsistent wages.
We're going to get to that data right now because incomes for all Americans beyond the hour, those who are still working an hour and getting paid by their jobs, their incomes have gone up, as I showed in the last chart. They've gone up about 5% because they fired all the other workers. But all those people who were fired are now represented in this chart. These are the people that are at home. They're not working. They're collecting unemployment benefits, but are now called enhanced unemployment benefits. So they're making $600 extra a week. That shows up in this data. U.S. incomes for all Americans rose by 10.5% in April on the heels of enhanced unemployment benefits. The expectation was for a 5.9% decline. So how do we ever get out of this situation where Jay Powell is printing his money, he's giving it away, the government is borrowing money, and $3 trillion this quarter alone, that's caused wages to go up. This is end of empire kind of stuff. This is bread and circuses, and it's really, really hard to end bread and circuses once you start.
Right. Well, the primary component in fiat money, the U.S. dollar, is cotton. So America is going to get back to cotton picking. Right? That's it. Cotton picking is going to be number one employee to feed that money printer in Washington. Money printer go burr, 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 burr. There's Jay Powell. He's in the big house, looking out over the cotton pickers. Pick me some more cotton so I can print some more fiat. Americans like, okay, will do.
Well, the Fed is, if you are looking for a job and your enhanced unemployment benefits are not good enough for you, here the Fed is still hiring apparently. So these are the sectors in the economy in the United States still hiring. Only a few of the hundreds of tracked categories added jobs last month. So this is for April. Warehouse, clubs, and supercenters. So if you're working at Amazon or Walmart, there are plenty of jobs available. Central banks, number 2, adding jobs. So it takes a lot of effort to apparently print that. I guess I could be employed. I could start working part-time.
More cotton out there. Pick more cotton. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Yeah, baby, let's do it.
And finally, Americans are doing something surprising with their money right now. Gretchen Howard, COO of Robinhood, describes a spike in deposits of $1,200 and $2,400, reflecting the amount in stimulus many individuals and couples received during the week of April 13th. So people are, again, bread and circuses. They love joining the speculative bubble. And they also, along with the Fed buying all these junk bonds, they were buying Warren Buffett's bags. They were buying Stanley Druckenmiller's bags. They were buying Carl Icahn's bags. He dumped Hertz. Guess who was buying? It was Robinhood apps, people with the free money for the Fed. The Fed knew you're going to give it to Carl Icahn and Warren Buffett and Druckenmiller to exit.
Right. Well, turns out the Fed is the dumb money. It's our money. Ooh, we're so dumb. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Tyler Lindholm. He is the representative for Wyoming, House District 01. For those outside of America, Wyoming is not only the most Bitcoin-friendly state in America, it's also the 10th largest state in the Union and the least populated. It's born for social distancing. All right, Tyler, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Now, many people will hear Wyoming and think not only Yellowstone National Park, ranching, farming. With the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw livestock destroyed while supermarket shelves were empty. What caused this, and what legislation did Wyoming introduce to address this, Tyler?
I think the first thing that we should make very clear, though, is that coronavirus did not cause the collapse itself of the meat supply chain. The meat supply chain was always pretty horrible. It was a centralized mess of kind of propping up 4 big monopolies. And that's where everybody gets their meat, whether it's from the back of a beef truck or from your grocery store, or whatever. It's all going through these 4 big outfits. And so the coronavirus was essentially just a straw that broke the camel's back. What Wyoming did, and we it was just really good timing on our parts. I've been working on this issue for right around 6 years. And what I did is I drafted a piece of legislation that took advantage of the Federal Meat Inspection Act. The Federal Meat Inspection Act says that all meat sold in the United States for retail has to go through a USDA packing facility. And so in the state of Wyoming, what we did is we fractionalized cattle. We said that you can sell shares on an animal, or you can sell shares on an entire herd of animals, and that way that share grants you access to those animals without going through all of the red tape and regulations and inspection processes, all of those things that add quite a bit of cost and also put more money in the packer's pocket.
So Wyoming is really taken on some great initiatives and put some great legislation in place, and particularly in the Bitcoin space. You have been a huge proponent of Bitcoin and have helped pave the way for Wyoming to become the crypto-friendly state in America. Why?
Well, it's all about that centralization. I mean, nobody likes centralization, right? Centralized government, centralized money, centralized meat supply chains. And so I became a big fan of Bitcoin and blockchain technology back in, I first learned about it back in 2012 from the Ron Paul forums. And I really studied down on it. And so when I got going in the legislature, I realized there were some issues in the state of Wyoming as far as how our laws were constructed. And we were actually one of the worst in the nation for Bitcoin. Our money transmitter's license was blocking any exchange from taking on Wyoming customers. We were able to fix that, and then we just kicked it up a gear. And now we've passed right around 20 pieces of legislation that handle everything from security law to banking law to a lot of those different aspects that have stood in the way from essentially this currency going industrialized and being able to really be utilized by individuals, even not it's not so much mainstream individuals, but more of your average folks that may not necessarily even know what Bitcoin is. This is an opportunity for them because it's much more mainstream now in the state of Wyoming.
Right. In Wyoming, that message of individual sovereignty seems to fit in with the ethos of Wyoming. And Wyoming's state motto is equal rights. Now, it was the first state to give women the right to vote out of necessity. Wyoming needed the votes to gain statehood. And, this is part of the interesting dynamic in the United States between the states and the federal government. So these two are competing with each other on some level. And could the same thing happen for Bitcoin? In other words, you looked at the American states and you said, there's a state out there called Delaware, and it gets a lot of business by being the #1 state that companies incorporate in. Why don't we do that and be the Delaware for Bitcoin? Why can't Wyoming be the destination for Bitcoin? And now this is exactly what you've done. My question is, could the same thing happen for Bitcoin, where other states see your success in this hyper and deflationary necessity? As the federal government's paper money collapses, the states, and by the way, in the Constitution, I believe it says this, only the states can create money. The states take it upon themselves to preserve America. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. That's knocking a home run, and that's exactly what we're chasing down. It's all about economic development. It's all about making sure there's this safe spot to land for these types of tech companies, and also an area that they can flourish. And so as states realize that their fiat currency is being devalued and their purchasing power is going in the toilet, I think there's going to be a lot of state governments and maybe even smaller governments that start turning towards different types of assets to protect their wealth, and just like individuals have done. And so Wyoming's definitely leading the way in that cause, but it's important to remember that we are nowhere close to even being done. We're still full steam ahead. We're looking at some really interesting stuff right now in regards to the Banking Secrecy Act as far as know your customer and anti-money laundering laws. And so I think we're going to have something fun for next year that really should flip things on its head.
On that note, the Wyoming legislature has just formed the Select Committee on Blockchain and Financial Technology. Are you a member? What are the plans for Wyoming in terms of fintech and Bitcoin?
Yeah, I definitely am a member. We had the task force before, and where we were a little different than like other states have task forces. We were different in regards we actually do things and actually accomplish things. So we were very successful. We moved it on to being a select committee so we could sponsor our own legislation, and we could do even more. We expanded who could be on it. And I myself am a member. We're chaired, the chairman of that committee are Chairman Jared Olson out of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Chairman Chris Rothfuss out of Laramie, Wyoming. Both great individuals. And of course, we've got Caitlin Long on that committee.
Caitlin Long certainly has been a huge fire starter in this area of getting Bitcoin to the masses using the existing infrastructure, because she has that incredible background on Wall Street in the banking sector. And she's a very high-level executive, and she kind of defected over to the Bitcoin space. And I know Wyoming is now ripe to become the destination for Bitcoin-based startups. Are you seeing that already? Are Bitcoin-based startups moving to Wyoming?
When we first started this whole journey and started our little task force, we had people showing up to our meetings without shoes on and just kind of some wildcats. Now, the folks that we got showing up are very much suit and tie. And kind of OGs in this space. We've got IOHK is now a Wyoming business. We take a lot of testimony from folks like Consensus and Crack, and then those types of folks. And so, yeah, they're coming. They're here already. IOHK just dropped $500,000 on the University of Wyoming to help with their blockchain lab. So that's it's happening. And if you're not in Wyoming yet, you're going to miss the boat.
Sticking with Caitlin Long, she's gone ahead and started a bank. Can you give us the details on that? What's the status? Where is that? How's that doing?
To be honest with you, I kind of, once the legislation's in place, I kind of take a step back and let them work out their business and how things are going to move forward. Last I talked to Caitlin, though, she said things were moving well and that they were getting close. You know, there's probably a total of 8 entities right now that are looking at starting up their own banks in the state of Wyoming in regards to digital assets, and all of those guys are moving full steam ahead. I've got, you know, I think a couple are probably going to finish towards the top, but it's fun to watch because we didn't spend as a state any money on attracting these businesses. We took a very unconventional route compared to how other states do this economic diversification. We just set legal precedents. We were smart and we sat down and we studied the laws and we figured out how we can actually move the laws in such a manner that still provides consumer protection, but at the same time is inviting to business. And so far, so good. It's been successful.
Now, I want to return to kind of this states versus federal government tension or the existence of this, because it's a checks and balance. It's built into the American system of governance to have many, many checks and balances, the various houses of government, and also between the governors of states and the president of the United States. So when you're talking Bitcoin to people in Wyoming, right, they're not from Silicon Valley, they're not financiers. Wyoming, as we said at the top of the show, is mostly about agriculture and ranching. And if correct me if I'm wrong here, I might be stereotyping what's going on there, but that's my perception. But isn't the urgency in the pitch? Isn't it about self-sovereignty, and isn't it about hard money and the fact that the federal government, needs to be kept in check, Tyler?
That's right. It's all about the 10th Amendment. It's all about state sovereignty. It's all about keeping our citizens and our state in a safe place, regardless of what Congress does. Because let's be very real about this: Congress is incompetent. What they're currently doing right now is a hot mess of any kind of reaction that they're doing, and whether it's in regards to coronavirus or the meatpacking deal, all of it's a hot mess. They could fix the meatpacking deal with legislation that just deregulates and lets states set their own course. And it would cost nothing for them to do that. But instead, they're going to do this whole pump and dump scheme into ranchers across the West, turn every rancher in the West into CRP farmers. And it's just an absolute wreck. So when we're talking about state versus federal, we really stretched our legs in regards to cryptocurrencies, but we've also stretched our legs in regards to gold and silver also. In the state of Wyoming, gold and silver is considered legal tender. I was a co-sponsor of that piece of legislation. And so you constantly see Wyoming doing these things, and it's because we want to separate ourselves from some of the horrible mistakes that are being made by the federal government. We don't really want to be associated with those guys.
Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute there. Gold is legal tender in Wyoming? Holy mackerel, I was on the fence, now I'm heading to Wyoming. How hard is it to master riding a horse?
To be honest with you, it's one of those things that when we're talking about these self-sovereignty type of concepts, the state of Wyoming, we do those things for breakfast, right? I mean, it's normal day of course for us, but in other states, there's such wild concepts, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's wild for me to hear about the regulatory schemes that other states put in place to somehow control their citizens. And in the state of Wyoming, we just want to leave people alone. So if you're not here, like I said, Max, if you're not here, you're going to miss the boat. It's time to move.
So you very graciously avoided the question of how long it would take me to learn how to ride a horse. I guess because it doesn't seem like it's even possible. Thanks so much, Tyler. I'm filled with confidence now. All right. No, only joking. Thanks for being on the show. It sounds fascinating. We'll check in with you again soon. Thanks for being on Keiser Report.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. Want to thank our guest, Tyler Lindholm. He's over in the Wyoming House of Representatives. If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, it's bye, y'all.